What's up, everybody? Welcome to Next Level. My name's Joe. I'm sitting down with some of my friends. Y'all excited?
Yeah.
Y'all pumped?
So pumped.
Pumped. Next Level, okay. We Next Level is all about elevating the conversation beyond just Sunday and into your everyday. We wanted to sit down with a group of friends and family. We're all family, and just talk a little bit more about last Sunday's message. And so the message was from Stephen Gibbs, and it was transformed by the train wreck. It was fire, y'all. It was really good.
Fire.
So I'm excited to talk about it. We're gonna dive straight in just a second. First, introduce yourselves. Okay, I want to know your name. And then what do you think of first when you hear the word train, or when you think of trains? What comes to mind?
All right. I'm Freddy. They call me Filipino Thunder around here.
Yes.
Okay.
If you're Joey, you say from down under, even though I'm not from Australia.
Cool.
Somewhere
But
there.
yeah, when I think of trains, I just simply think about the train around a Christmas tree. And I've always wanted one of those. So,
Nostalgia.
babe, if you're watching, I want a train around the Christmas tree this year. Cool.
Okay.
Make it happen, John.
That's
Make
great.
it happen.
I love it.
That's good. My name's Ryan, the campus pastor here at the Milton campus. Yeah, that's cool.
Yes,
When
yeah.
I think about trains, I remember being a student pastor in Bremen, Georgia, and several of the seniors went on a railroad track, like on a bridge, and like were taking selfies and videos and stuff. And I was like, you can't do that. Like, don't do that. And I got to speak at their baccalaureate service and got to call them out in front of.
I bet they loved that.
Yeah, they love
They didn't,
it.
like, their parents didn't know. So Courtney, friends, love you guys. Don't do that again.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Rude.
Safe? I don't know.
Okay, yeah. So I'm Hannah. I'm a kids ministry protege this year. And
All-star, rock star,
Baller.
year 2,
Oh, yes.
coming back.
Yeah. Here again.
Love it.
Let's go.
What do you think of when you think of trains,
Yes.
Hannah?
I think of the Polar Express.
Ooh.
Hot chocolate.
And now I'm going to think of Joey singing when I think of hot chocolate.
All right.
I'm Joey McLaughlin, and when I think of trains, I think of Kayla and I took a train from Belgium to Paris. So I think about that.
That was amazing.
Love you, boo.
Everybody go, aw.
Aww. All right. Well, when I think of trains, y'all, first thing that comes to mind, James Bond. All right. Every time I think of train, I think of him like punching people, taking down his enemy on the train, or he's sitting there with one of his lady friends, just sitting there talking. Okay. So that's what I think.
That's a way to put it.
Moving on.
Yeah.
Moving
All
on.
right. Cool. Hey, first question I have for us to just talk about. Okay. What's one line, one idea, one thought that just hit you maybe in the feels from Stephen's message? It was so good. Tell us. What was it?
Yeah, the first thing that hit me in the feels that I love so much is that Stephen cried 3 times.
Yeah.
It made me feel like we were back in person. Like,
Yeah.
there's the Stephen Gibbs I know and love. So
Yes.
I thought it was awesome. But a couple of ballin' phrases that he dropped. He said, there's no change without challenge.
Yeah.
I think that that's just absolute truth.
Yep.
And then trials are the arena where growth happens.
Yeah.
That's just absolute facts. You think about it, when somebody like looks at a woman and she goes, you're such a strong woman, right? Which you are, Hannah. You're such a strong
Thanks,
woman.
Joey.
But nobody says that to somebody who hasn't been through anything.
Yeah,
You know?
for sure.
Yeah.
Strength or trials are what produces that strength. It's when
Yeah.
you've gone through difficulty that somebody looks at you and goes, man, you're so unbelievably strong. So trials are the arena where growth happens.
really
I'll never
good.
forget it.
So good.
It's real good.
So good. Who else?
Yeah, I loved when he said, your outlook determines your outcome.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
really try to be a positive person sometimes, a lot of the time. And if like I go into something and I'm not thinking positively of the outcome,
Yeah.
it changes everything that happens before that. So
Yeah. So good. So
Yeah,
good.
something similar to what he said is let joy lead the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like let joy, kind of the optimism, the joy, and I know we're going to talk more about joy and like what is even
Yeah.
joy, but if we can allow joy to lead the way in our lives,
Yeah.
this train wrecks would look so different.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. For sure.
It's good. I mean, yeah, for me, I think it was when he said that like train wrecks and like difficult times are for transformation.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that was just like, okay, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and so if y'all remember, he set the stage talking about James chapter 1, verses 1 through 2, and it starts off and it says, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds." So he says that word "when," and I think that's super good for us to recognize because that means train wrecks are coming, trials are coming, it's happening. And so, first question, and we're gonna dive in deep right now. Okay, we're diving in deep. You gonna sing?
Take it to the next level.
Okay, cool. All right.
No Steven Curtis.
And
Oh,
so,
I'm diving in. I'm going deep. And on my head, I want to be.
all right.
Stop. We have to pay for it.
Okay.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Forgive our copyright
okay.
infringement. All right, ready? All right, so I want to dive in with the first question. We're going in deep right now. Okay, why do you think God allows train wrecks to happen in our lives?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that one.
Okay.
And Stephen talked about it a little bit with Job, right? Like the devil and God are talking, and you know, Job's the righteous guy. Like, go test him, go try him. And for me, when trials come my way, and I don't know if God was doing this up in heaven, but I hope so, that God's like, that's my boy Job.
Yeah.
Like, that's my boy. Do whatever you want, because he has my back. Like, he's in it. Like, he's never gonna like leave,
Yeah.
you know, believing in God. He was the most righteous God. So, hey, devil, you can do whatever you want, because
Yeah.
I'm believing in my boy, who's
Yeah.
always gonna believe in me.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, it's like, why does he allow us to go through that? For me, I have to believe, because he has confidence in my faith
Wow.
to endure and persevere
Yeah.
through it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, the first thing that I think of, and it's super theological and maybe basic, but also a different perspective to think about, is that life isn't fundamentally about me. And until I get to that place of understanding that my life is not for me, but it's actually about his glory, it's going to change how I see a train wreck.
Yeah.
So if a train wreck comes my way, and I think that fundamentally what life is about my happiness, my comfort, my peace, my security, then I'm angry at God for the train wreck. But if I see my life as fundamentally about the glory of King Jesus, then I see the train wreck as an opportunity to give him even more glory, because when things aren't good and they don't go my way and it's not a win, I get to show that nothing is better than him.
Yeah.
He's enough in the midst of the train wreck.
That's
So
so good.
I think that's why he allows Christians to go through difficult things, because we get to show that nothing is better than him.
That's so good.
How do you get there? Like, is it just like, I gotta believe it, and like this is it, or is this maturing of faith, or like how do we?
Not everyone thinks like that.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you ask the question, the first thing that I think about is my pastor crush. And it's a guy by the name of Matt Chandler, leads a church called the Village Church in Dallas, Texas. And I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, Matt got cancer, and he was this fast-growing, dynamic pastor, took a church from like 200 to 10,000 seemingly overnight, and he gets brain cancer. And Matt makes this video, and he gets on, and he says, you know, I've got this massive tumor on my brain, and the diagnosis isn't good. And so he goes, you know, in my travels this summer, I've been teaching through the book of Hebrews, and in Hebrews 11, it's the roll call of faith.
Yeah.
Right? We all know this.
Yeah.
And it lists out all these great men and women of God who've done
Yeah.
things. They shut the mouths of lions. They quenched the furies of flames. They sent foreign armies to flight. And he goes, that's what I feel like I've gotten to do over the last several years of my life. I've gotten to do all these amazing things. God has been so faithful. But then Hebrews 11 turns, and it says, but some were sawn in two.
Yeah.
Some were put to death by the sword. Some experienced the fire of flames. And so some walked with God but didn't get blessings because the world was not worthy of them.
Wow.
And so Matt says this phrase. He goes, so I might die of cancer, and I've thought about the fact that I may never get to walk my little girl down the aisle. I may never get to see my boy become the athlete that I never was. And I've hugged my wife, and we've cried our tears. But none of those things are better than him.
Wow.
And so I think until you taste God, until you know God, until you've been with God and in his presence and know the gospel deep enough to know that this world isn't better than him, you're never going to get there.
Yeah.
Until Jesus becomes so good, you're never going to live for his glory.
Yeah.
So I think go there first. Like, get to know the King of the universe in a way where he's enough.
Wow.
That's good.
Yeah.
Drop the mic, man.
Steven crying. You're
mic.
about to have all of us crying.
I'm crying.
Now Joey's
Gosh, we're
crying.
like 4 minutes in, and
Wow. Okay, cool. Well, I think let's talk about some train wrecks then. Okay. Let's talk about some trials maybe that we've faced. And so tell me, what's a train wreck, a trial that you have faced in your own life where you felt like God was testing you, where he was maybe trying to grow you?
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't want to like frame this as like, if you're single, life is terrible. But like when I was single, it was like my life was terrible. But like
For you.
yeah, for me
Okay.
personally, because I think I had this almost idolatry of marriage.
Wow.
And whenever I would get rejected by a woman, it was like I would let that define me.
Yeah,
And
wow.
I would constantly hear the lie that I've always heard all my life, which is, "Oh, you're not good enough. You're really kind. You're a good friend, but you're not good enough."
Yeah.
You know, so for me, like, I've had to deal with that train wreck of like, oh wait, like, I probably need to, instead of like focusing on like finding that woman, I need to like find the Lord and like find how good He is and find, you know, dive deep into His heart and His word, and then I can see, oh wait, I am good enough.
Yeah.
And it's not just, but it's not just about me, right? It's that transformation that we've talked about. Like, it transformed, that train wreck transformed me, because it's not like, oh, I was single and then I was married. It was like, no, when I was single, I realized who I was in Jesus.
Yeah.
You know? And so I think, like, for me, that was a really, really, really transformational thing.
Yeah.
But it was really difficult.
Yeah. That's so good, dude. That's so good. Stephen talked about, y'all remember Stephen talked about that sometimes we let our trials, our train wrecks define us, and then that becomes our identity and who we are. And so you experience the loss of a loved one and you let that then, your kids, and it's, so difficult. And it can be, that's what we build our lives around then.
You are not what has happened to you.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
You are who God says you are.
Yeah.
And you've got to coach yourself. I love that our next series is going to be just a thought, because we're going to talk about the power of thoughts. And when we let that thought creep in, I am this thing that's happened to us, or to me, it's so unbelievably destructive. So I think that's money, Freddy.
Yeah. Wow. Who else? Other train wrecks?
Yeah, I think even for me a couple years ago, we moved back. Ashley and I and the whole family moved from San Antonio, Texas, back here for an opportunity at a church, and that opportunity ended up not working out. And so I'm caught in a place of going like, what is going on, right? Like, I thought this was the move back to hometown, back to where Ashley's family is. Like, what is going on? And for me, right, I got stuck real quick and kind of going like, oh, this is just me. This is, man, I'm terrible.
Yeah.
And it was my wife who kind of reinstalled and reinstilled the joy in my life.
That's good.
And how she did that was going, no, right, are you kidding me? Like, let's look at our whole life. Like, let's look at every time God has come through and every time that He's prevailed. And let's look back at the last 10 years and go, man, every trial and every train wreck has produced this joy and this perseverance and this authenticity and this pursuit of God, and this is going to do the same.
Yeah,
and it began to turn my soul and my heart into going like, man, I've got to live. I've got to let joy lead the way, and I got to live out of this joy, knowing and believing that Jesus, God's going to show up again.
Count it all joy.
Yeah, that's so good. How do you, so you talk about referencing and remembering God's faithfulness. How do you get to a point where you actually recognize God's faithfulness enough to where you can remember it when you need it? How did you get to that point where you're like, okay, we're going to look back at all of these things?
Yeah, I didn't, right? I mean, I didn't. It was my wife, right? And that's what, going back to last week, the friends you keep and the crew you keep, right? Like, it's just having those people around you too, because in the midst of it, it's tough and dare say impossible to do it alone, right? To remember those things. And you've got to have the people around you affirming your gifts and your talents and your abilities and how God's done it. And so I think for me, like, if it wasn't for Ashley and the friends around me, if it wasn't for Joey calling me and going like, no, stop.
Yeah.
Like, God has something greater for you, then I would have been stuck.
Wow.
So it's not me. This is why this series is so great.
Yeah.
It's this culmination of like, you really can't find joy maybe unless you have this crew, this foundation with Jesus and the crew you keep.
That's good.
That's good.
So good.
Yeah, a huge train wreck for me was my freshman year of college. Left home, went to West Georgia, where I wanted to be a nurse. My whole life, I wanted to be a nurse, and could not pass chemistry. The worst.
Wow.
Don't recommend. 0 out of 10. No. And it became this: you're never going to be able to be a nurse. You're never going to be able to pass science. Like, you're going to be a failure. You are a failure. And I was at a place like I didn't grow up in church, and so I came to know the Lord in high school. I was 16.
Wow.
So 2 years later, I graduated.
Oh, wow.
Moved away from my home church. I didn't have a church family out there, so I wasn't surrounded by those friends that keep you accountable and point you in the right direction. And it became just this downward spiral of awful thoughts, like you said, controlling everything, just negativity. And it just, the whole year, I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. I went home every weekend. I was sad. Like, it was not not a good thing, I was not in a good place. And like looking back on that now, the reflection part of what y'all have been touching on is like, I look back and I'm like, nothing that I've gone through, like 2020, the train wreck that it is, like nothing really compares to where I was my freshman year of college. And so I am able to see, okay, if God was with me through that, like we can get through the 6 months of being in our house, you know?
How did you get out of that?
Yeah.
Like how did you go from there to maybe where you're at now?
Yeah. I literally got out of that. I packed up my stuff. I said, no more West Georgia.
Okay.
I moved back home.
Okay.
That's good.
I got
All right.
I got back involved with those friends who held me accountable and who loved me and cared for me. I did what made me happy. I wasn't happy, and I literally removed myself from that situation, from the things that weren't producing fruit to where I knew I was comfortable and encouraged and loved. And so
that's good.
Back
to week 1, right?
Well, what I love so much about it is, so we're talking about how to survive a train wreck. Train wrecks transform you. What happened in this train wreck, God wanted to change you, and he wanted to change where you were at, right?
Yeah.
He wanted to move you from West Georgia to a different place. And sometimes, like, the way to survive a train wreck is to get off the stinking train, right? To go, like, let me get out of here. What God's trying to do in the midst of this is go wake up, move. And I think we got to recognize that sometimes we're in the wrong place, and that's why the train wreck is happening. Now, just because it's difficult doesn't mean that you're in the in the wrong place. Sometimes you got to ride the difficulty out.
Amen.
But you might want to consider, God, are you telling me to move?
Yeah.
Right? Because a train, I see it coming.
Yeah.
Maybe let's get out of the way.
You tell me to jump,
that goes like you were about to say, like back to week 1, like remove and replace.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
So I mean, sometimes you just gotta hop on out of there.
Yeah.
And if he's calling you to move to Sandy Springs.
Preach. Preach. Vision right now. Yes, Lord.
I got you.
All right. Next question. Okay, this is kind of a part 2 to the first question, but like, so if God uses these trials to kind of test our faith, to shape our faith and mold us, Joey, I want to ask you this, like, what does that look like for you in your life? Like, has there ever been a time you've been like, God, are you testing do I have enough faith in this moment? Like, what does that look like for you?
Yes, I know you asked me that because the answer is yes. I mean, so a couple of years ago, I got diagnosed with psoriatic arthritis, which I knew nothing about it. Long story short, I have psoriasis. It creates inflammation throughout my body. And I woke up one day and I couldn't walk for weeks. And I'm going to doctors and trying to get answers, and they're draining my knee and doing x-rays and MRIs. And I like to think I'm an athlete. I don't know what you guys think, but
average.
But I'm active, and man, playing sports and running and wake surfing and wakeboarding and snowboard, like I love it. And not being able to walk was really, really challenging. And kind of simultaneously, I'm doing a lot of like theological work around like sign gifts and asking myself hard questions like, God, do you still heal? And do you still do miracles? And I start to wrestle going like, okay, like I think you do heal, but I don't know if you're going to heal me. And what does that mean? And then going, okay, like if this is the test, right? Like I'm reading the Bible and I'm looking at all these great things that men and women of God have done where they have lost their family, or like Job, right? Job has everything ripped out from him. Matt Chandler, I talked about every day earlier, he gets cancer and he keeps on going. People are being persecuted for their faith in the Middle East, and they're still walking with Jesus. And God, like my knee gets a little inflammation, and all of a sudden, I don't know if you heal.
Wow.
All of a sudden, I don't know if you're good. All of a sudden, I don't know if you love me. I don't know if you're for me. And like, I didn't lose a kid. And I'm just going, what is wrong with me? Like, and I really felt like in a very godly way, I went, I failed this test. You showed me that my faith was a whole lot more talk, that when it got difficult, I was out real quick. And so it was good. Kayla and I had lots of really hard conversations, and God didn't heal me. Like I'm on medicine to do this thing. But what I realized is that my faith was in my circumstances.
Wow.
And it wasn't in an unchanging God and him being enough. So I think that's a continual process that I'll always have to work on, to go like, okay, God, you are enough. So I'm still living in it today, I'd say.
Yeah. Wow. And could it be though, like, so what are some things on some of the other half of it, because you said you're still living it, that maybe God changed in you in that season where now you look a little bit different than maybe you did before?
I think one is I'm probably way more gracious towards others who have moments of doubt and moments of struggle than maybe I used to be. I think another thing is, I think between the knee thing and miscarriages, God just started to get my eyes on eternity a lot more. And people probably saw this start to come out of my preaching when I came back from India too. And it was right when I was wrestling with that. And I just started to feel like this world is never going to be enough. And I feel that really deeply right now. Like I'm always going to be longing for heaven. And recognizing that and realizing that I wasn't made for this place, and I'm never going to be whole here. I'm never going to be at home here. I'm never going to be put together here, but one day I will. I think that really changed in me. Like you asked my wife, I'm always eternity now. I'm always like, we got 80 years of the grind, and then eternity with Jesus.
Yeah.
So
that's so good.
I mean, that was one of like the applications that Stephen mentioned was like, he said, take a step, but then keep your eyes on eternity.
Wow. Yeah.
Like, I think that's so good, Joey.
Yeah. Back to this joy piece. Okay. I want us to come back to, so the count it all joy. Okay. What does it look like to count? So how can you count that as joy in the middle of that season? And for any of y'all's stories and like, how do you count it as joy? Because I know Stephen talked about like, it's not like you're going to say, oh, my kid has cancer. Yes.
Yeah.
No, that's not the case. But how can you have an outlook of joy in the midst of a circumstance that will lead to an outcome of perseverance or endurance?
Yeah, I think what you said was extremely right. And so many people can get it confused of, hey, count it all joy. I mean, while I'm in the middle of it, I've got to count that as joy.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I don't know, and if that's the level, or if that's what we're trying to obtain to in the midst of the bad news or the job loss or the cancer or the death, like for us just to immediately go to like, yeah, I'm full of joy. Like I don't know, I haven't gotten there yet. But for me, counting all joy is going in that moment. I may not feel joy in that current situation, but I've got to look back and count those joy, and with that joy, we'll pull this current circumstance into joy as we move further.
Yeah. Do you think it's preparation? Could that be an ingredient? We're not preparing because we don't want to accept the fact that we're going to meet trials. So we're not preparing our minds and our hearts and our attitudes and we're not ready for it, right?
Yes. Yeah. Because look at what he says. He says, count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials. Yeah. So he's telling you to do something before it happens. He goes, hey, it's going to come. You've got to decide right now that I'm going to count that as joy. Don't think. God is trying to get us to see things the way that he sees things. He's trying to elevate the conversation. He's trying to take us to the next level.
Boom.
And he goes,
always doing it.
when it comes, don't see it like the world sees it.
Yeah.
Don't see it as me disciplining you.
Good.
Don't see it as me hurting you. Don't see it as me robbing from you. See it as me growing you. See it as me testing you. See it as me giving you an opportunity to show the world that I'm enough. So I think that if you don't go into it, if you haven't predetermined anything that God sends me, and you need to start preaching it to yourself all of the time. One day there's going to be a knock on my door. I'm going to get a phone call, and when it comes, I want to see it as joy. I want to see God working in the midst of it for my good and for his glory, not against me.
Yeah. Well, I think also it's like there's a misconception, like you were talking about. Like, it's not like joy is just this big party, right? Like,
yes,
joy is something that lives deep inside your soul.
Yeah.
And so I would also argue that like it's not just what is joy, but where is your joy sourced from?
Yeah.
Like, because if my joy is sourced from the gospel, the beauty of the gospel and Jesus and his heart for us, okay, you might be onto something there. But if my source of joy is in my circumstances or how my life is going or any of those things, or my job, my work, any of those things, it's going to fall apart, you know? And I think like so many times in my life, I have counted, I thought I had counted things joy, but I realized like the source of joy was like completely wrong.
Wow.
And so I think we need to have like a shift there of like, no, like my joy is sourced from Jesus and his love for me and his grace for me. And that's how I can count this terrible situation joy, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and joy is, right, a fruit of the Spirit, right? And so, and if there's the fruits on the tree, right, and you go back to John 15, abiding in Christ, Jesus is the vine and we're the branches, and we're clinging on to Jesus. Jesus is going to produce that joy in us.
Yes.
The joy is not the money. The joy is not what our kids do. The joy is not oh great, look how our life is now. The joy is actually produced because we're bear hugging,
Come on with it, dude.
grabbing the leg of Jesus and going, you have to produce joy into my life. I can't do it.
Yeah, that's good.
That's so good.
Hannah, what does joy look like for you?
Joy looks like for me, I mean, just kind of a culmination of everything. But like Freddie, you were just talking about where your joy comes from, and I'm an Enneagram 3, no matter what Joey says.
Wow, some tension there. Okay.
Well, it's me and Hannah are the same person, is what she's trying to say, and I've got some. I don't know. Maybe.
I don't know if I want to go as far as we're the same person.
Wow.
Just
I don't think that's how it works.
Okay.
Anyways, all that was to say, I thrive on doing things, completing things, achieving things, but what you were saying, Freddie, my joy doesn't come from the tasks that I'm doing or the things that I'm completing, but from God, who God made me to be,
Let's go.
and why I am that way. And just not circumstantial, because there are circumstances that are less than great. And even in reflecting and looking back, even in those, there was joy. I was just, my focus wasn't where it should have been. So yeah.
Wow. That's good.
Yeah, I think it's a great question and a great thing for us to all think about. And joy is so weird. And people treat it so weird.
Very.
And I get it, because it's this deep biblical word that has so much nuance to it. But I do think that there's this component of joy that the Bible wants for believers that is like this exterior happiness. I think that that's part of it. But then I also think that there's this component to joy that is this internal state of your soul that doesn't change regardless of circumstance. And so I think that, I don't even know if this is going to be helpful, but I remember one of the earliest definitions that I heard for joy was Jesus, others, yourself, right? That a life of joy is where you prioritize Jesus, others, yourself. But then also realizing that the way that you receive joy is by receiving from Jesus, receiving from others, and receiving from yourself. So what is Jesus pouring into your life right now through his word? What are others pouring into your life? I think that recognizing that I have a love language and that I need people to speak that love language to me, and that produces joy is important. And then myself, what am I doing to myself to feed myself, to lead myself, to invest in myself? Because those things produce joy as well. Now it starts with Jesus, right? It starts with me serving Jesus and receiving from Jesus. And then it's others. It starts with me serving others and then receiving from others. And then it's myself. It starts with me serving myself, leading myself, caring for myself. And that's, I think that's where joy comes from. So I don't know if that's helpful.
Come on, that's good.
And I think one thing to recognize in the midst of this is that sometimes we think that joy is the outcome we're after. That like God wants us to have joy because of the trial, but that's not how it works in this passage right here. And if you look at Romans 5 too, joy isn't the outcome. Joy is what gets us to the outcome, which is more of Jesus. It's endurance and perseverance. And 2 Corinthians talks about preparing us for the, Joey knows it better than me, the way of eternity, preparing us for eternity. And so joy isn't the goal in this situation, in the circumstance. Joy is what can produce that.
I love that. And so our light and momentary afflictions are achieving for us an eternal weight of glory that far surpasses them all. And so realizing that ultimate joy is coming in the end, and that's going to come as we suffer well, as we lean on Jesus in the midst of that, and then eternal joy, eternal glory. It's in the future.
Woo, you better preach, bro. Come on. You better preach.
Some shoes.
I threw my shoe. That was good.
All right. So we're running out of time. Okay.
I love you.
We're running out of time. This is where I want us to land this plane. Okay. One thought, okay, if you can give one encouragement to someone that's in the midst of a trial right now, okay, in the midst of a trial, a train wreck, it seems like everything has fallen apart, and now we're telling them to choose joy right now. What does that look like? What's that encouragement for them? A few words as we wrap this up.
Yeah, the phrase that comes to my mind is just keep walking.
Wow.
Just keep walking. I mean, you look at it, it's the story of the Bible. The Israelites have to just keep walking. They're in slavery, but they have to just keep walking. They're in the desert, but they have to just keep walking. And one day they find themselves crossing into the promised land. And so I think if you will just keep walking, if you'll keep your eyes on Jesus, if you'll not give up, then it's coming. It's just a matter of time. He is working all things for the good of those. It doesn't mean that it's going to happen instantaneously or overnight. Just keep walking.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think for me, probably two things is one, don't be alone. Don't just remove yourself and go, man, this is it for me. And so I'm going to kind of get the room dark, stay in the bedroom and just kind of just stay there. So don't be alone. But if you are alone right now, like curl up in a ball and scream out the prayer to God that you've been wanting to.
Yes.
Ask the questions, start there. Like maybe you don't have the friends, maybe you don't have the family, maybe you are all alone and you really have like nobody really around you. Have that tough conversation and ask Jesus, go like, man, I it's so hard. I don't know if I can. I want to, but man, produce this joy in me. I'm hurting. Yeah. I'm upset. Provide, Jesus, show up in some tangible way. So I just give me a little bit of help so I can have joy.
That's good.
Wow.
I mean, I think mine was kind of along those lines. It just immediately made me think of what Steven said. Like, you need a joy coach.
Yeah.
You know, like sometimes you just need that person around you that's like full of joy, AKA Joe Baker, because he's a 7 and he's, just always full of life. But no, like you need that one person or that someone that is just like, it's hard to see joy in your trials. And so you need that perspective from someone else. Like we talked about last week, like to see like, oh no, wait, like, Jesus is still good, even though this trial has happened, right? Like, and so I've had tons of those people in my life where it's like, no, Fred, like you're missing this. Like, it's okay. Like, I understand. I'm going to acknowledge that this trial is happening. Yeah. But like, hey, like, count it all joy, and I've had those people in my life, blessed to have those people in my life, and find a joy coach. Hear me? Find a joy coach.
Come on. Tell him.
Because you need someone in your life. I'm going to go and then Hannah, you go. You need someone in your life that can tell you your trial isn't changing who God is.
Yes.
Trials don't change who God is. They change who you are.
Yes, that's
and
good.
I think so oftentimes where we have so much tension is because we think that God has promised that our lives are going to be perfect and that our lives are going to be pain-free and that our lives, we're never going to experience hurt. And so whenever that happens, whenever we experience that trial, we go to, God, you lied.
Yeah.
God, you fell back on your word. God, you let me down. Yeah. God, you're failing me. God, and we think that God has somehow changed in the midst of it. And what's great about God is that he doesn't change, which means that his love is still there and his goodness is still there and he is still faithful. And so we need someone in our lives to remind us that it's the problem, that the problems of today are going to prepare us for the purposes of tomorrow. And so we need to be reminded always that like what's happening now is meant to change me. And I know it's tough and it's hard and it's not as easy as this sounds right now. But if you can surround yourself with people that can remind you of that and then talk to God, be honest with him, game changer.
Because it takes doing that inventory, right? Of going, God, what do you want to change in me?
Yeah.
I think some of us are like, no, God doesn't want to change it. No. If you would recognize, like, maybe this is for a reason. Maybe you've got some pride. Maybe you've got some arrogance. Maybe you got some bitterness. Maybe you got some materialism that he's trying to get out of you.
Yeah. That's
good.
Recognize that. You are not who you are going to be or who he wants you to be yet. You are in process. That realization, I'm in process. God is still growing me. And
that's good.
If I've still got breath in my lungs, God's still got me to get out of me and him to get into me. And so sometimes he sends things my way because it needs to be less of me and more of him.
That's good. Careful, I might throw my shoe at you.
Yeah, that's money. All right, Hannah, last final words.
I don't know how I follow up.
Get out of here, girl. You are brilliant. Drop it.
Yeah, I mean, I just cling on to your outlook determines your outcome.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of like surrounding yourself with the right people, acknowledging that, this is not great. I'm not enjoying this, but it's not always going to be like this.
Yeah.
And kind of acknowledging, hey, I am in progress. Like, there is something that God is trying to show me that I need to remove, replace, like redo, renovate, all of that. And how you look at it is going to determine where you find your joy from, and how you feel throughout it, and how you act around others through your trial and things like that. So,
and I got one more thing too, like giving people the permission to have joy in the midst of the trial. Right? Because so often we're in the trial and like, oh, we have to seclude. We have to be depressed. We have to just have this outlook of despair. And if we have joy that my, dad has cancer, or if I have joy that I lost a child, if I have joy, like, what are people going to think of me?
Yeah.
Right? And the reality, the world's going to look at you and go like, who are you? Right? But that's what we want, right?
Yeah. We're supposed to look different.
Like, don't we want people to go like, who, what? Yeah. What?
Yeah.
This is wild. This is... There's no way you can, and in the midst of this could be in the midst of trials, one of the greatest ways we can separate ourselves from the world and close to Jesus is having joy in the midst of the trials.
That's good.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's wrap this up. I love that. So good to recognize, hey, we're all in progress, right? And we're not up here pretending like we got everything figured out. That's why we have these conversations, and that's why we film these conversations, so we can all recognize, hey, God's working on us. He's trying to make us more like his son, Jesus. And so we're grateful you tuned in, you guys. I'm grateful for this conversation. I love these times. Make sure you tune in next week, Next Level, episode 4. It's going to be awesome. We'll see y'all there.
Here we go.
Bye.